Hello there. Once again, by looking further afield than just the UK, we find that EU member states are also going through the wringer. Oh, and Keir Starmer is out on EU manoeuvres. Just look at how bad things are in the UK, the rejoiners wail. We must rejoin the EU or we are doomed for all eternity, they opine. And now we have Keir Starmer pledging to rewrite the Brexit deal. More on that one later. Anyway, let's take a look at our nearest EU neighbour, France. Listening to the Remoaners, you'd think that France was booming, with not a hint of a cost of living crisis. But, oh dear, they do have a cost of living crisis. Although the overall inflation rate is 4.9%, the Times reports that annual food inflation is running at 11.2% and may still be rising, with frozen veg up by nearly 22%. And food is the essential thing for everyone. You can put off buying new clothes, cars and furniture, but not food. And energy inflation, that had been negative for a couple of months, shot up to 6.6% last month. Now France, like Germany, wants to continue their emergency subsidies given to the energy sector after the Russian invasion of Ukraine into 2025. But the EU Commission wants them ended by the end of this year, something that could force energy inflation higher. The EU Commission says the subsidies are no longer necessary and will skew the internal EU markets. But Politico.eu reports, neither France nor Germany is keen to kill off subsidies entirely, fearing they will lose industrial competitiveness and that leading industries will move out, with investors seeing incentives to focus on projects in the United States and China. And in another sign of how tight things are in France, their Minister for SMEs, Trade, Crafts and Tourism, Olivier Gregoire, has called for cooking lessons in French schools because the younger generation seems to be drawn to fast foods and home deliveries. Grandmother education, she called it. I also believe that we must relearn how to cook raw products to avoid buying more expensive ready-made products, she said when answering questions from readers of Sud-Ouest. And this drew heated criticism, with some comparing her to Marie Antoinette. And the French Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, announced on Saturday that because of rising fuel costs, the rules preventing below-cost selling will be lifted to allow vehicle fuel providers to sell below-cost fuel in their forecourts. If they want to, that is. Dunno about you, but this for me has the whiff of desperation about it. And the French Finance and Economy Minister said today that this move will take the pressure off of the public purse and help the French people. The state can't bear the cost of inflation by itself, otherwise that will deepen the deficit, Le Maire said. Sounds like it will hit fuel providers hard, if they do so though. And surely that will affect future tax takes and the like. Now, the French ban on below-cost sales has been in force since 1963 to protect the smaller retailers. But large retailers like supermarkets with forecourts see it as a loss leader to get people into their stores where they can recoup that loss. So they're all for it. The president of the Mobilions Industry Group, representing 5,800 independent service stations, Francis Pousse, said his members would get hammered by this. My members get 40 or 50% of their income from fuel sales, so if they sell at a loss, I'd give them 3 months, he said. Then they're toast, with the big boys winning out. All that fairness up in smoke. Beating inflation by beating up the little guy. Doesn't sound like they're having a good time of it over there, does it? And remember, the ECB sets the interest rates for the Eurozone for the benefit, supposedly, of no particular country. So Macron does not have direct access to that crucial lever to control inflation. It's all about subsidies and tax, together with the permission of Brussels to do anything. And here's what Reuters said about this at the end of last year. Belgian motorists are crossing the border into France to fill up on subsidised fuel that costs the Treasury billions of euros and is designed to shield French households from the full inflationary pain felt in some neighbouring countries. Wonder if that tank tourism, as they call it, still goes on, or if the new low-wage premium has stopped it. But if the big fuel providers start selling below cost, will the Belgian drivers return? Reuters also said, subsidies and aggressive price caps on energy have helped shore up consumer spending in France, and with it economic growth. But maintaining these costly inflation relief measures is getting harder, and weaning households off the state's largesse may unleash a new wave of price rises down the line. At some stage, those chickens will come home to roost. I would compare it with our response to the 2008 credit crunch, where low interest rates and quantitative easing continued for years after they should have been ended. Something I would argue has exacerbated the effects of the pandemic and the Ukraine situation. And we still own a hefty slice of RBS, 58%. No wonder the likes of France and Germany want to keep their subsidies in place. But France has a high debt to GDP ratio. It's expected to hit 112.8% by the end of this year and keep rising until at least 2028, where it could be in the region of 115%. So don't believe the hype. The UK is not alone in having a cost of living problem, so rejoining the EU is not an answer. And here we have Keir Starmer pledging to march into Brussels and renegotiate the whole Brexit deal to our benefit when it comes up for review in 2025. That to me says he's not been paying attention. Not only does Brussels not negotiate in good faith, something those Remoaners who used backdoor comms channels with Brussels to prime them on how to trip us up know only too well. Not only that, but we have a snivel service full to the brim with people who will gladly rewrite the deal in a way that forces the UK to become once more serfs to Brussels' diktats. Every draft will arrive on Starmer's number 10 desk with that intent in mind. And we all know that most MPs and the vast majority in the House of Lords would rubber stamp such a deal through with undue haste. And we'll be hearing the words of Ted Heath all over again. This deal does not affect the sovereignty of the UK, while quietly hiding the legal officer's assessment that it does. And Starmer is at heart a rejoiner, so we cannot trust him on this. So any deal Starmer does strike with the EU will be to our detriment, not to our advantage. Anyway, why would the EU want to help us out while they are still busy trying to work out how to rebuild the EU after the hammering everyone has received in the last few years? It's like Starmer's claims that he'll get the EU to help us with our irregular migration problems. We've already heard that an EU diplomat has basically said the EU hasn't even sorted its own irregular migration problems out because the Dublin Accord is failing them. So they're going to sort that mess out first and then decide if they want to help us. Right now, Keir Starmer is doing a David Cameron. Remember that? When Cameron toured the EU capitals just before the Brexit referendum, trying to get some sort of new arrangement to ensure that Remain won. And he returned with zilch, but claimed a lot. Starmer is doing exactly the same, parading through the EU and wider afield, claiming much. But he'll also return with nada of consequence.